The ship was cold, not the kind of cold that came from broken heating systems or poor insulation. This was a different cold. It was the cold of metal walls built by hands that were not human. It was the cold of air filtered through machines designed for lungs that breathed different gases. It was the cold of being very, very far from home. Sat in her assigned seat and looked out the small window. Earth was gone now. It had disappeared 3 days ago, shrinking from a blue marble to a tiny dot to nothing at all. She had not cried when it vanished. She had simply watched, memorized the last glimpse of her planet and turned away. There were 12 of them on this ship. 12 humans chosen from billions. 12 representatives of their entire species, sent to compete in something called the Galactic Combat Trials. The aliens who ran the universe had been watching Earth for a long time. They had finally decided that humans were ready to be ranked among the 63 known spacefaring civilizations. The trials would determine where humanity stood. Already knew the answer the aliens expected. They expected humans to stand at the bottom. She was 28 years old. She had been a mixed martial artist back in, fighting in small gyms and local tournaments before getting noticed by the national team. She had won some fights. She had lost others. She had broken bones and torn muscles and bled on canvas floors in front of screaming crowds. None of that mattered now. What mattered was that someone in the government had put her name on a list, and that list had been given to the aliens, and now she was here. The other humans on the ship were mostly quiet. There was a soldier with hard eyes and a harder jaw who spent most of his time doing push-ups in the narrow corridor. There was a taekwondo champion with quick feet and a nervous laugh. There was a Navy veteran who never spoke unless spoken to. There was a from Seoul who cracked her knuckles constantly. There was a wrestler from who smiled too much for someone heading toward possible death. And there were others, 7 more, had learned all their names, all their faces, all their fighting styles. She did not know how many of them would survive the trials. She did not know if she would survive, but she intended to try. The ship docked at Prime on the 7th day. Prime was a space station the size of a small moon. It floated in neutral territory, claimed by no species, governed by ancient laws that predated human civilization by millions of years. Stepped off the ship and felt gravity pull at her differently. It was lighter here, maybe 80% of Earth normal. Her body felt strange, like it might float away if she moved too quickly. The station was filled with aliens. Had seen pictures and videos during her preparation training, but nothing could have prepared her for the reality. There were creatures with too many limbs and creatures with no limbs at all. There were beings made of light and beings that seemed to absorb light. There were giants that stood 4 meters tall and small things that between feet like insects. The noise was overwhelming. Hundreds of languages, none of them human, all mixing together into a wall of sound. The humans were led through the crowds by a floating drone that beeped impatiently whenever they slowed down. They passed through markets and residential areas and something that looked like a park, except the plants were purple and moved on their own. Finally, they reached a large building with smooth white walls and no windows. Inside, they were separated. Was taken to a small room with a single chair and told to wait. She waited for 2 hours. She did not sit in the chair. She stood near the door and stretched her muscles and practiced her breathing. She had learned long ago that waiting was part of the fight. Whoever made you wait wanted you to feel small. She refused to feel small. The door opened. The alien that entered was tall, very tall, over 2 meters, with 4 arms and skin that looked like polished black stone. Its eyes were silver and had no pupils. It wore something like a uniform, dark gray with symbols did not recognize. It moved with the easy confidence of a predator that had never met anything it could not kill. This was were the trainers. Every competitor in the Galactic Combat Trials was assigned a coach. It was supposed to be an honor. Had read that they had produced more champions than any other species in the history of the trials. She had also read that they had produced more corpses. They looked at her, All four of its arms crossed over its chest. "I am," it said. Its voice was deep and cold like stones grinding together. "I have trained warriors for 200 cycles. I have produced 11 champions and 47 elite rank fighters. I have never lost a competitor to early elimination." It paused. "I have also never trained a human." Bowed, it was automatic, the habit of respect drilled into her since childhood. "I am," she said. "Thank you for taking me as your student." Did not bow back. Its silver eyes examined her like she was a piece of meat. "Humans are weak," said. "Your bones are fragile, your muscles are inefficient, your reflexes are slow. Your species evolved on a soft planet with gentle gravity and moderate temperatures. You are not built for combat. You are built for survival through cooperation and tool use. In the arena, there are no tools. There is no cooperation. There is only you and your opponent and the question of who will fall first." Said nothing, she kept her face calm. "I have studied your species," continued. "I have watched recordings of your primitive fighting competitions. I have analyzed your biomechanics, your pain thresholds, your psychological breaking points. I know exactly how much pressure it takes to shatter a human mind. I know exactly how much force it takes to break a human body." Leaned closer. Its breath smelled like copper and something chemical. "I will break you," it said. "Not because I want to, because I must. Only by breaking you can I determine if there is anything inside worth rebuilding. Do you understand?" Looked up at the alien that towered over her. She thought about her grandmother who had survived a war. She thought about her mother who had survived poverty. She thought about herself, who had survived every fight she had ever been in, even the ones she lost. "I understand," she said. "When do we begin?" Silver eyes flickered. Perhaps it was surprise, perhaps it was something else. "Now," it said. Smiled. She was ready. The gravity chamber was set to 3 times Earth normal, could barely stand. Every muscle in her body screamed. Her bones felt like they might crack under the weight of her own flesh. Breathing was agony. Each inhale was a battle against the invisible force crushing her chest. Stood outside the chamber, watching through the transparent wall. That was unaffected by the gravity. Its species had evolved on a world far heavier than Earth. What was torture for was a light morning breeze for. "Run," commanded through the speaker system. Ran, or she tried to run. It was more like a slow, painful shuffle. Her feet felt like they were made of lead. Sweat poured down her face and dripped onto the floor, where it fell 3 times faster than it should have. She made it 10 meters before her legs gave out. She fell. The impact hurt more than any punch she had ever taken. The floor was hard, and the gravity made it harder. She lay there for a moment, gasping, feeling the weight of 3 worlds pressing down on her spine. "Get up," said. Got up. She fell again after 15 meters, then after 8, then after 3. Each time told her to get up. Each time she did. By the end of the first hour, she could not feel her legs anymore. By the end of the second hour, she was crawling. By the end of the third hour, she was dragging herself forward with her arms while her useless legs trailed behind her. Watched without expression. This was day 1. Day 2 was worse. Increased the gravity to 3.5 times Earth normal. Vomited twice before noon. She kept training anyway. The vomit fell faster than normal, hitting the floor with heavy splashes. She wiped her mouth and continued. Day 3 introduced the toxic corridors. These were hallways filled with atmosphere that was poisonous to humans. Was given a small breathing mask that provided only minimal oxygen. She had to run through the corridors while her lungs burned and her vision blurred. The gas made her skin itch. It made her eyes water. It made her want to scream. She did not scream, she ran. On day 4 broke. The soldier with hard eyes and a harder jaw, the man who had seemed like the strongest of all 12 humans, simply stopped. He was in the middle of a combat drill against training drones when he suddenly fell to his knees, covered his face with his hands, and began to cry. The crying turned to screaming. The screaming turned to words that made no sense. The medics came and took him away. Never saw him again. On day 5, tapped out. The Taekwondo champion with quick feet had been doing well until a sparring session went wrong. Both of her shoulders dislocated at the same time. The pop was loud enough to echo through the training hall. Screamed, but that was not why she quit. She quit because when the medics fixed her shoulders and told her she could continue, she looked at the training drone that had hurt her, and she saw fear in her own reflection. She removed her competitor badge and walked away. 2 down, 10 remaining. Trained harder. She learned that the training drones were programmed to exploit humanoid weaknesses. They knew exactly where to strike to cause maximum pain. They knew which joints bent the wrong way. They knew which organs were vulnerable. Fighting them was like fighting an enemy that had read a textbook on how to destroy her body. She fought them anyway. She lost every match. She got up every time. On day 6, increased the gravity chamber to 4 times Earth normal. Took 1 step inside and immediately collapsed. The weight was unimaginable. It felt like a giant hand was pressing her into the floor. She could not breathe. She could not move. She could barely think. Stand, said. Tried, her arms shook, her muscles tore. She could feel something in her back screaming, threatening to break. She pushed anyway. Slowly, painfully, she got 1 knee under her, then the other. Then she began to straighten her spine, fighting against the impossible gravity with nothing but human stubbornness. She rose. Not all the way. She could not stand fully upright, but she rose to a hunched position, her legs bent, her arms hanging heavy at her sides, her head bowed against the weight of 4 worlds. Blood dripped from her nose. Her vision went black at the edges. She looked at through the transparent wall. "Is this the real training, coach?" she asked. Her voice was a ragged whisper, but heard it through the speakers. "Or still warm up?" Said nothing. For a long moment, they simply stared at the human who refused to fall. Could not read the alien's expression. She did not know what those silver eyes saw when they looked at her. She only knew that she would not give this creature the satisfaction of seeing her break. She had been broken before, by life, by loss, by a world that did not care about one small girl from. She had put herself back together every time, and she would do it again. The warm-up, finally said, is over. The gravity increased to 4.5. Fell, this time she could not get up. The weight was too much. Her body had finally reached its limit. She lay on the floor of the chamber, feeling her ribs creak with each breath, feeling her heart pound against the crushing pressure, feeling consciousness begin to slip away. But before she passed out, she smiled. Because had answered her question. That meant had acknowledged her. That meant she had done something they had not expected. That meant, in some small way, she had won. The medics came and pulled her from the chamber. They injected her with something that made the pain go away. They put her in a healing pod that would repair the damage to her muscles and bones overnight. They told her that training would resume in 12 hours. Closed her eyes and slept. She dreamed of Earth. She dreamed of the ocean near, the gray waves hitting the rocky shore. She dreamed of her grandmother's hands, wrinkled and strong, teaching her how to make proper rice. She dreamed of her mother's voice, singing old songs in a language that the galaxy did not know. When she woke, her body was healed. The pod had done its work. She got up, she stretched, she walked to the training deck. Was already there, waiting. They looked at her. For a moment, something passed across those silver eyes, something that might have been curiosity, something that might have been doubt, something that might have been the first tiny crack in 200 cycles of certainty. "You came back," said. "I always come back," replied. She began her stretches, her warm-up, her preparation for another day of pain. Behind her, watched in silence. And for the first time in a very long career, the legendary trainer wondered if perhaps she had underestimated her opponent. Could not sleep. This was unusual. They did not dream the way humans did, but they needed rest. Their minds required periods of low activity to process information and maintain efficiency. Tonight's mind refused to slow down. The human was still alive. This should not have been possible. Had designed a training program specifically calculated to break the human spirit within the first week. The program had broken thousands of competitors from dozens of species over 200 cycles. It had never failed. It was mathematically certain to succeed. And yet the human kept getting up, rose from her resting platform and walked to the data terminal in her quarters. She activated the screen and began to search. If she could not sleep, she would study. She would find the weakness she had missed. She would understand this strange species that refused to die when they were supposed to. The database contained extensive files on humanity, had reviewed the basic biological information before beginning training. Now she went deeper. She accessed the historical archives. She began to read. What she found disturbed her. Humans had been fighting each other for their entire existence. They had invented thousands of ways to kill their own kind. They had burned cities. They had dropped weapons that could poison the land for generations. They had starved millions of their own people through stupidity and greed. They had committed horrors against each other that made the galactic combat trials look like children's games. And they had survived. Every catastrophe, every war, every plague and famine and disaster, the humans kept going. They rebuilt. They reproduced. They spread across their planet like a virus that could not be killed. They were weak individually, fragile compared to most spacefaring species, but they refused to accept defeat. Found files on Korean history specifically. She learned about the invasions this small peninsula had endured. She learned about the occupation, the war, the division of one people into two nations. She learned about a culture that had been crushed again and had risen again and had somehow kept its identity through centuries of suffering. She watched old fighting videos. These primitive human competitions were brutal in their simplicity. No weapons, no technology, just two bodies trying to break each other. Analyzed dozens of fights looking for patterns. She found one. Always got hit first. In every fight she absorbed the first blow, sometimes the second, sometimes the third. She let her opponents think they were winning. She let them spend their energy attacking her. And then, when they were tired and confident, she struck back. She always bled first. She always won last. Closed the data terminal. She sat in silence for a long time, thinking about what she had learned. She had trained warriors from species that were faster than humans, stronger than humans, more naturally gifted for combat than humans would ever be. But she had never trained anything that was more stubborn. Perhaps that was the key. Perhaps stubbornness was a weapon that the galaxy had underestimated. The next morning, training resumed. Had designed today's session to test the limits of human pain tolerance. It was a sparring match against her coach. They would use only 2 of her 4 arms to make it fair. She would strike at half power to avoid killing the human immediately. It should have been a simple demonstration of dominance. They faced each other in the training ring, looked small and fragile compared to the towering. Her human body was covered in bruises that had not fully healed. Her eyes were tired. Her muscles still ached from days of torture. But she stood ready. Attacked. That was fast, faster than anything had ever faced. The first blow came from nowhere, striking in the ribs before she could react. She felt bones crack. The pain was extraordinary, a white-hot explosion in her side that made her vision blur. She stumbled but did not fall. Struck again and again. Each blow was precisely calculated to cause maximum pain without causing death. There was dismantling piece by piece, demonstrating the vast difference between their species. This was what humans were, the blows seemed to say. This was their place in the galaxy, at the bottom, beneath the feet of their betters. Spat blood onto the mat. It was a lot of blood, too much blood. The medical protocol demanded immediate cessation of training when a competitor showed signs of serious internal injury, hesitated, waiting for to tap out to surrender, to finally break the way she was supposed to. Grinned. Her teeth were red. Blood ran down her chin and dripped onto her training clothes. She looked like something from a human horror story, a monster wearing a small woman's body, but her eyes were clear. Her stance was steady. "My grandmother survived a war," said. Her voice was calm, almost casual, as if they were having a conversation over tea instead of standing in a pool of her own blood. "My mother survived poverty. They raised me to survive anything." She raised her fists. "I can survive you." And she attacked. Blocked the first punch automatically. The second one surprised her. The third one forced her to step back. Suddenly, impossibly, there was on the defensive. This small, broken, bleeding human was pushing forward, throwing strikes that should not have been possible from someone with cracked ribs and internal bleeding. The blows were not powerful enough to hurt. Human fists could not damage skin. But that was not the point. The point was that was still fighting. The point was that she had taken everything could give her and responded with more. The sparring session ended when the medical drones intervened. They surrounded, injected her with painkillers and healing agents, and carried her to the medical bay. Stood alone in the training ring, looking at the blood on the mat, looking at the dents desperate fists had made in her forearm guards. For 200 cycles, had been certain about many things. She had been certain about her methods. She had been certain about her understanding of combat. She had been certain that she knew what warriors were made of. Now she was certain of nothing. That night submitted a formal reassessment to the High Council. The document was unprecedented. In 2 centuries of service, had never revised a species evaluation upward. She had always been right the first time. Her judgment had been flawless. Until now. The reassessment recommended immediate elevation of humanity's threat classification. It included detailed analysis of human history, psychology, and the unusual phenomenon that humans called perseverance. It concluded with a warning that the galaxy had made a serious error in dismissing this species as weak. The Council received the document, they read it, they discussed it among themselves. And they laughed. What could one trainer know that the combined wisdom of 63 civilizations had missed? Humans were primitive. Humans were fragile. One stubborn female did not change the nature of an entire species. They filed the reassessment and forgot about it. But did not forget. She watched heal. She watched the human return to training 3 days later, still sore but ready to work. She watched those tired eyes fill with determination that had no logical source, no reasonable explanation. And began to understand something that the Council did not. The humans were not weak. The humans were something far more dangerous. They were patient. The day of the galactic combat trials arrived like a storm. Prime transformed overnight. The quiet training station became a carnival of noise and color and alien bodies. Ships arrived from every corner of the galaxy. Representatives from all 63 spacefaring civilizations filled the viewing platforms, the restaurants, the betting halls. The air buzzed with excitement and anticipation. The humans gathered in their assigned preparation area. Of the original 12, only 4 remained. Stood with and they looked at each other and saw the truth. They were tired. They were scared. They had been broken and rebuilt so many times that they barely remembered who they had been before. But they were still here. That meant something. "We are the weakest delegation in the history of these trials," said. His voice was flat, stating a fact rather than complaining about it. "Every other species has at least 8 competitors remaining. We have 4. "Then we have to win 4 times as hard," replied. She cracked her knuckles, an old habit that she had never been able to break. "Show them quality over quantity." Smiled his too bright smile. I just want to last long enough to make them remember my name. If I'm going to die, I want to die famous." Said nothing. She was looking at the massive screen that displayed the first round matchups. Her name was there, paired against a symbol she recognized from her studies. She was fighting There were reptilian warriors from a high-gravity world. Their bodies were covered in natural armor, thick scales that could deflect most physical attacks. Their claws were venomous, capable of delivering a toxin that paralyzed prey within seconds. They were fast, strong, and had been competing in these trials for thousands of years. The betting odds appeared next to the matchup, 47 to 1 against. The entire galaxy expected her to die. "Well," said quietly, "at least someone will make money if I win." The arena was enormous. It floated in the center of Prime, a sphere of transparent material that allowed spectators to watch from every angle. Inside, the fighting surface could be configured for different gravity levels, atmospheres, and terrains. For this match, it was set to low gravity, about half of Earth normal. This favored neither species, a neutral compromise. Walked through the tunnel toward the arena entrance. Her body felt strange, lighter than it should have been. She had spent weeks training in crushing gravity. Now she felt like she might float away with each step. Was waiting at the tunnel's end. The look different today. Something in her posture had changed. Her forearms hung loosely at her sides instead of crossing defensively over her chest. Her silver eyes were softer somehow, though could not explain how she knew this. "I must tell you something," said. Stopped, she looked up at her coach, waiting. "When I was assigned to you, I intended to break you." His voice was quiet, meant only for ears. "I believed humans were inferior. I believed you would shatter within days. I designed every training session to prove my assumption correct." Nodded, she had known this from the beginning. "I have trained warriors for 200 cycles," continued. "Champions, legends, killers who made the galaxy tremble. I have seen strength in many forms. I thought I understood what it meant to be a fighter." The paused. For a moment, something flickered across her alien features, something that might have been emotion. "I was wrong." Waited. "You are not the strongest competitor I have ever trained. You are not the fastest or the most skilled. By every measure I know you should have failed, but you did not fail. You endured. You refused to stop. You took everything I gave you and asked for more." Placed two of her hands on shoulders. The touch was surprisingly gentle. "I have never trained anything like you," said. "Go show them what I failed to destroy." The arena doors opened. Walked out into blinding light. The noise was overwhelming. Thousands of aliens filled the viewing platforms, their voices creating a wall of sound that seemed to press against skin. She could not understand their languages, but she understood their tone. They were excited. They were hungry for blood. They had come to watch the weak die. The gladiator was already in the arena. It was beautiful in a terrible way. Scales the color of deep ocean water covered its body. Its eyes were yellow with vertical pupils, cold and predatory. Its claws gleamed under the arena lights, each one long enough to pierce through its body completely. It stood nearly 2 meters tall and moved with the easy confidence of an apex predator. The crowd roared approval as the raised its arms in victory pose. It had already won a dozen matches in previous trials. It was a favorite. It was expected to advance to the final rounds easily. And its first opponent was a human, a small human female who had barely survived training, an insect to be crushed. Walked to the center of the arena. She did not pose. She did not threaten. She simply walked, calm and steady, like she was taking a morning stroll through a park back home. The watched her approach. Something flickered in its yellow eyes. Confusion, perhaps. It had never seen prey walk toward it without fear. The arena announcer spoke in a language did not understand, but she recognized the signal when it came, a deep tone that resonated through the floor. The fight had begun. The charged immediately. It moved faster than anything that large should be able to move. Its claws slashed through the air where its head had been a fraction of a second before. She had ducked, her body remembering the endless hours of training, moving before her conscious mind could think. The second slash caught her arm. Pain exploded up her shoulder as the claws tore through flesh. Blood floated in the low gravity, forming red spheres that drifted slowly around them. The crowd screamed with delight. First blood, human blood. The entertainment had begun. Stepped back. The pressed forward, sensing weakness. Its claws came again and again, slashing, cutting, trying to finish this quickly. The human was bleeding. The human was retreating. The human would fall any moment now. But kept moving. She was not running away, she was studying. Every slash told her something about her opponent, its speed, its range, its habits. She was bleeding, yes, but she was also learning. The hesitated. This was not how prey behaved. Prey ran. Prey cowered. Prey tried to escape. This human was doing none of those things. She was watching, waiting, her eyes sharp and focused despite the blood running down her arm. What was she waiting for? In the stands, watched without breathing. 200 cycles of experience told her what was about to happen. She had seen it in the old fighting videos. She had studied the pattern. Always got hit first. She always bled first. She always won last. The attacked again. But this time something was different. This time when it slashed, moved forward instead of back. She slipped inside the reach of its claws, too close for them to cut her. She was inside its guard, face to face with the monster. And she smiled. Not the smile of someone who was happy. Not the smile of someone who was confident. It was the smile of someone who had been waiting for this moment. The smile of someone who had finally found what they were looking for. The smile of someone who was about to prove the entire galaxy wrong. The round ended. Both fighters retreated to their corners, was bleeding but she was still standing. And for the first time in its long career, felt something it did not recognize. It felt doubt. Round 2 began with the attacking even harder than before. The reptilian warrior had felt something strange during the first round. It had tasted human blood. It had landed clean strikes that should have ended the fight. And yet the human was still standing, still watching with those strange, calm eyes. This was wrong. This was not how prey behaved. They decided to end it quickly. It charged with all 4 limbs driving forward, claws extended, venom dripping. The attack was perfect. It was the same combination that had killed 17 opponents over the years. Nothing survived this assault. Moved. She had spent weeks in gravity 4 times heavier than this. She had trained her muscles to work against crushing weight. Now, in this light arena, she felt like she was flying. Her body responded faster than it ever had before. She slipped the first claw, ducked the second, and rolled under the third. Then she counterattacked. Her fist struck the knee joint. It was one of the few places where the armor scales were thin, allowing flexibility. The impact was not powerful by standards, but it was precise. The joint bent slightly in a direction it was not meant to go. The reptile stumbled. The crowd fell silent. Had the human just had the insect actually struck back at the predator? Did not celebrate. She was already moving, already positioning for the next exchange. Her arm was still bleeding from the first round cuts. The pain was intense, but pain was an old friend. Pain had been her constant companion for weeks. She knew how to work through it. The recovered and attacked again, but now it was more careful. The confidence was gone. In its place was something the reptile did not want to admit. Respect. This human was not prey. This human was something else entirely. Something that had never encountered in its long fighting career. Something that took punishment and kept coming, that bled and kept fighting, that smiled through the blood like pain was just fuel. Round 2 became a chess match. The probed with quick strikes, testing defenses. Slipped and dodged, making the reptile miss by centimeters, conserving her energy while forcing her opponent to work. By the end of the round, the was breathing hard. Its species was not built for extended combat. They were ambush predators, designed to kill quickly with overwhelming force. This fight was taking too long. This prey was too stubborn. Returned to her corner. Was there with healing spray and tactical advice, but was not listening to the words. She was watching across the arena. She was seeing what the crowd could not see. The reptile was afraid. Not of her strength, not of her speed. It was afraid because it did not understand her. It had never faced an opponent who simply refused to accept defeat. It had never fought against something that smiled when it was bleeding, that attacked when it should have been dying. It was afraid of her spirit. Round 3 began. It came forward, but its movements were different now. Hesitant, uncertain. It threw combinations that lacked commitment, pulled its strikes short, moved with the caution of a creature that had started to doubt itself. Saw the opening. It came in the 4th exchange. The extended too far on a claw strike, overreaching in its desperation to end the fight. For a fraction of a second, its center was exposed, its balance compromised. Exploded forward. Everything she had learned came together in that moment. Every brutal hour in the gravity chamber, every toxic corridor she had run through, every sparring match against drones that knew exactly how to hurt her, every time had knocked her down and she had gotten back up. All of it was for this. Her first strike hit this exposed throat. Human fists could not break armor, but the throat was different. The soft tissue there protected vital blood vessels. The impact was precise, disrupting blood flow to the brain. The staggered. Followed with a knee strike to the damaged joint from round 2. This time, she hit it at the perfect angle. The joint failed. The massive reptile dropped to one leg, its balance destroyed. The crowd was screaming now, but it was no longer the scream of bloodthirsty spectators watching prey die. It was something else. It was shock. It was disbelief. It was the sound of 63 civilizations watching their assumptions shatter. Did not hear them. She was focused entirely on her opponent. The tried to rise. It was a warrior. It had pride. It would not surrender to this inferior creature, this soft-bodied human who should have been dead in the first 30 seconds. But its body would not obey. Circled behind it, she applied a choke hold that she had practiced 10,000 times in the gyms of. It was a technique designed for human opponents, but anatomy was anatomy. Blood vessels were blood vessels. Pressure points were pressure points. The struggles grew weaker. Its eyes began to close. And then it was over. The arena went completely silent. Thousands of aliens stared at the scene before them. A human, small and bloody and impossibly alive, standing over the unconscious body of a gladiator. The reptile's natural armor was cracked in 6 places. Its breathing was shallow but stable. It would live. But it had lost. To a human. The silence stretched for 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 15. Then from the section of the stands a sound began. It was slow and rhythmic, clapping, a gesture that had learned from studying human archives. Other joined. Their forearms made the clapping louder, more resonant. Then other species began to add their own gestures of approval, stomping feet, waving appendages, sounds and movements that did not recognize but understood instinctively. Applause. The arena trembled with it. Stood in the center of the ring, bleeding and exhausted, and more alive than she had ever felt. She looked up at the thousands of alien faces watching her. She looked at the section where stood, all 4 arms raised in celebration. She had done it. After the fight, the medical drones patched her wounds. Journalists from dozens of species requested interviews, agreed to one. The reporter was a being of light that floated before her like a small sun. Its questions came through a translation device, in a voice that was oddly pleasant. "How did you survive training that was designed to destroy you?" it asked. Thought about the question for a long time. She thought about its brutal methods. She thought about the gravity chambers and toxic corridors and endless combat drills. She thought about the moment she had cracked her ribs and kept fighting anyway. "Destroy me," she laughed softly, shaking her head. "Coach didn't try to destroy me. She reminded me what I'm made of." The interview ended. The reporter floated away to find other stories, sat alone in the medical bay, letting the healing machines do their work. Entered quietly. The stood beside's bed. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. They had been through too much together for words to be necessary. "The council rejected my reassessment," finally said. "They still believe humans are weak." Nodded, she had expected this. "But I know the truth now," continued, "and soon so will everyone else. You will face stronger opponents in the coming rounds, faster opponents, more experienced opponents." "I know," said. "You may lose." "I know that too." Was quiet for another moment. Then she did something that shocked them both. She reached out with one of her hands and gently touched his forehead. It was a gesture of affection that reserved for family. "You will not lose," said, "because you have something they do not understand, something they cannot predict or counter or defend against." "What's that?" asked. Looked at her human student, this small creature who had survived everything, this impossible fighter who smiled through blood and pain, this representative of a species that had been dismissed by the entire galaxy. "Heart," said. "Your people call it heart." She stepped back. Her silver eyes held something that they did not have a word for, but humans had a word for it. "They called it pride." Smiled. In the distance, she could hear the crowd still celebrating. She could hear her name being chanted in languages she did not understand. She could hear the galaxy beginning to realize that everything they thought they knew about humanity was wrong. The warm-up was over. The real fight was just beginning.